Happy Friday! Welcome back to FU Friday, another episode of Go FUD Yourself. We have a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. But Ceara, how are you doing?
I'm amazing. I'm enjoying FU Friday. We have a really solid FU too. You guessed it, Gary Gensler. But
No.
I think I'm excited today because sometimes it feels like we're in a void. Like we know that other people want to say FU to Gary, but nobody has done it. And today we have just influencer after influencer publicly stating FU to Gary Gensler. So we've got big influencers, we've got small influencers. We're going to talk about 3 of them in particular. And then we're also going to talk about some other Gary Gensler FUD. Apparently he hates AI and thinks that it's going to kill the financial world. Kind of interesting. And then we can talk a little bit about how this is impacting the crypto market in the USA. And to wrap it off, if we run out of things to say FU to Gary Gensler about, there's some weird new news from the RCMP about how they're going to be dealing with crypto crimes. And I mean, it's kind of a given, but it's a bit of a weird news story. So I'm hoping that we get there too.
I think we should apply for that, but we'll talk about it in a little bit. We got a ton of stuff to talk about. So let's
Good. You want to just go?
Yeah, but before we do that, we're a live show Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. We're on all the different venues. Like, share, subscribe. Bookmark on Twitter, please, if you're watching the replay. It really helps with reach and helps us spread the love. We're going to play a quick video right now. It's 24 seconds long.
Let's go. Let's do it.
Well, just hold on. I got to change my speakers, man. Holy moly. You're so impatient today.
So jacked.
Okay, let's freaking go. All right, we are back.
JD, you're not on air yet. You didn't turn your on air sign on.
Oh,
yeah.
You made a comment yesterday about how I should do it when we start the stream. So there we go. My shirt even has some pink accents.
So you're all matchy match today. That's nice.
Yeah. All right. Where do you want to start?
Okay. So first of all, Gary Gensler, we still hate him. We've always hated him. I don't feel like there's new news about Gary, to be honest. It's just that every time he does something now, people actually respond. So for a while, everyone tried to kind of ignore what was going on and say, like, it's not going to touch us. It's going to take a long time. And now that regulation is happening, and now that some of the lawsuits are ending or coming to an end, people are starting to realize that they have to actually pay attention. So basically, Gary put out this tweet yesterday. It's going to be a little bit blurry, but he put out this tweet asking people for feedback on capital markets and technology markets and business. And so you can fill out an online form, you can email them, or you can mail them. And this blew up on Twitter in a not so good way. So that a bunch of people have been not only responding to these tweets, but doing like live streams and that kind of thing to respond to the tweets about how they don't trust Gary. And so I thought we could just jump into a couple of these more prominent crypto Twitter peeps.
Yeah.
As opposed to just you and I.
So I was going to say this earlier, but I saved it for now. I think that all of these crypto influencers now have the confidence to say FU to Gary, thanks to Go FUD Yourself. I'm going to take 100% of the credit for that. We started a movement.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyways, okay. So
no one else calls it the crypto arms race yet either, and I'm waiting for that to pick up steam. So
yeah, we should trademark that probably. Anyways, okay.
Right. So the first person we're going to talk about is Bruce Fenton. So Bruce Fenton is the CEO and founder of Chainstone Labs. He used to be an executive at the Bitcoin Foundation, and he has lots of negative things to say about Gary. Primarily, he says that Gary is not transparent enough and has a lot of personal motive. And before you even get started, I have to FUD that right out the FUD door because Bruce is running for a Senate seat in New Hampshire. So if anyone is going to pot call kettle black, I feel like it's this dude being like, Gary, you have a political agenda. Like, yeah.
So do you. You're running potentially for the same seat that Gary might be, which is probably interesting or useful context for this story is that this could in fact just be a political sparring match. over two potential candidates in the same riding. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see how that all plays out. I mean, obviously, we share that sentiment. Generally speaking, the last year has done nothing but probably cause more problems than prevent any issues. If you look at it from a macro perspective, like what was the overall impact to the space as a consequence of the SEC actions over the last year? And the answer is overwhelmingly negative. So I think that sentiment is shared by most people. Yeah.
So I do need to talk about this guy slightly more because he's a Republican, I believe I read, and Bruce Fenton is a Republican. And he has a lot of things to say about Gary, and he has a lot of things to say about politics, but part of his running is actually to be super crypto focused. And so I don't know if New Hampshire has a particular crypto following. I didn't look into that, but kind of an interesting platform to be prioritizing. But I guess go with what you know. But he's also like a lot of American politics. I find that a lot of American politics is just so much showboating and so much trying to get people on board, right? Like he's doing the super conservative thing, being like, we're not going to be woke about finances. And you're like, okay, you don't know what that means. Like you're just throwing out the words that you know will resonate with people. You don't have an actual plan. But his words are so strong. So he said, Gary Gensler, his capricious and ham-handed handling of the digital asset space and his lack of transparency harmed the industry and harmed the American economy. And while I don't specifically disagree, I just wanted to draw attention to the passion and the extremeness of when people are politicking.
Yeah, they're always generally leaning on hyperbole in these environments. But I mean, yeah, I think in terms of making this one of his primary campaign items, I actually think is a winning strategy, to be honest. Yeah. It's one of the few issues that, generally speaking, is not divisive based on party lines, but rather inclination to adopt new technologies and education and understanding. Like it's support for crypto, it happens irrespective of party politics, generally speaking. Yes, there's some party lines that, of course, everybody's trying to fight for coverage in the branches of government. But in this particular case, I actually think it's a winning strategy. I think it's a good way to unite people potentially from both sides of the aisle as well.
I appreciate that, and I can see that being a strategy, except that a lot of the terminology he's using already is going to distance himself from
security.
No, from the left, because he's like super. I don't know, just the language that he uses is so far right, which is fine. Like, I don't care. Except that if you're going to have this like middle ground strategy, then you might want to, when you're talking about crypto, just use some more neutral terms. That's all.
Try to act like you're a moderate.
Even if it's just for that one topic, because people who care about it are going to watch only the news on that topic. People don't do their research, right? So I don't know. I just thought it was a little bit weird, and I thought it was quite hypocritical.
Man, you're funny today.
I'm super funny today. But I thought it was hypocritical to call out Gary and be like, you're not transparent and this is all for personal gain, when like literally that statement is for personal gain.
So, this is 2 weeks in a row that someone on our show has stuck up for Gary, I think.
Oh, I'm not sticking up for Gary.
Sounds like you are. Giving him the benefit of the doubt.
No, I just don't like Bruce Fenton's approach.
I feel like every time I hear Bruce Fenton, I always think Bruce Banner. But anyways, which is ridiculous, but that's what I think. Every time I see it, every time I read it, every time I hear it, that's what I think. But anyways, okay.
All right.
What about
the next one is
Shiba
actually
Biba.
a company. So Shibburn has also publicly stated that they don't want Gary anymore. So on that same tweet that we showed before, they responded and they posted it on their own page and just said, "Tip, you can resign." So I don't know. I think it's pretty strong when there are companies that are taking a stance against you as the company, right? Like usually we try to play nice.
Yeah, and they're definitely they're definitely not pulling any punches. Like it's one thing to have that opinion as a company, and it's another to very, very publicly state it as from the corporate entity. So, I mean, I don't really know anything about Shibburn. But Yeah, I mean, I think this is just indicative of the space as a whole. Where I think we're going to run into some friction going forward is many people's issues with the SEC right now is because they're wanting things to be regulated and they're wanting to consider things as securities. I don't think just by a Gensler resigning or any of our vocal opposition to that's going to change the trajectory of regulation in the US. Like, that ship has somewhat sailed, and now it's our opportunity only to try to influence the bills that are coming up for votes. Everything else, in my opinion, is an act of futility. So, I mean, this seems promising because we've got a lot of people maybe pushing back against the SEC, but I think in terms of like realistic potential outcomes, thinking that Gensler resigning, although I would be happy to see it, and it would just be nice for the space as a whole to have a new personality in there. But I mean, sometimes the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. Who knows who would replace him?
It could be way worse.
I mean, if it was Hester, I'd be all for it. But I mean, who knows? It could be worse. Exactly. It could be someone who's even more controlling and condescending and patronizing than Gary. So let's hope that's not the case.
Okay, and then our final crypto influencer that we'll actually talk about today is Mr. Huber. And basically,
Huber.
Well, he's German. Huber.
I have no idea how to actually.
So this isn't news. Like, there's nothing new that has come out. It's just that for whatever reason, he's decided to tweet about Gary recently, probably in relation to some of these tweets that have come up from Gary. But Huber is really upset about the SEC's simplistic crypto token classification. He has things to say about the Howey test. He's commented on things that the XRP lawyers have said, agreeing with them. And basically, he says that Gary Gensler is being too generic in all of his responses when asked about the complexities of tokens. So nothing we haven't seen before, but to have a big international crypto influencer, because this guy is German, although he tweets in both English and German, can be kind of a big deal. And so for the record, his tweet, if you want to find him, is Mr. Huber. He's got all kinds of stuff up there. Also, though, everybody's talking about how he's a big crypto influencer, and a lot of these tweets only have like 150 likes. So I don't know at what point we're qualifying people as influencers right now. If someone like him could get on the news, like, maybe I can.
I feel like that tweet is slightly engagement farming, to be honest.
What?
Which we have to be careful with when we're taking, and this is not just us, but this is for everybody. When you're looking at influencer posts, you have to take some of that with a grain of salt. Were they paid? Do they have some sort of allegiance or alignment with whoever it is they're talking about? Most often that's the case. And lastly, do they actually mean these things, or are they using hyperbole, as we talked about in the last segment? Are they using hyperbole just to try to get attention?
They would never.
But I mean, I think, again, this is something that there's probably not a perfect answer to. If you oversimplify it too much, yes, it's simple. It's simple to understand, but then it might miss a lot of the nuance, and a lot of the edge cases might never be taken into consideration. The flip side of that is, well, in fact, the inverse, where they try to get so complex and detailed that we never get a freaking bill that makes any sense. And anytime something new launches, we can't figure out how to cover it in existing regulation, i.e. needing crypto regulation in addition to securities regulation, because it is, as a general rule, different. Anyways, I tend to agree with him here, but I just think we have to thread that needle somewhere. We have to start somewhere that's broad enough that there's a starting point, and then we can see what else needs to be captured in the regulation later on. So I don't know. I'm a little bit in the middle on this one.
So this is interesting, actually. The next article that we found is that Gary has actually tried to take like a softer language stance with crypto lately. So he's not saying that he's anti-crypto. He's not saying that all tokens are securities, just that many of them might be securities. He's trying to stress that there have been regulatory gaps for things like market manipulation and custody, and that's hurt people, right? And that Binance and Coinbase have actually hurt people with their custody. I find this interesting because obviously he wants to secure his position. He wants to stay where he is. He wants to remain relevant. And so he's trying to have a nice little PR spin. I think it's a great strategy, but also we already know how he really feels. So it seems like too little too late.
Yeah, I mean, I read this as very patronizing and condescending. So his language to me feels very insincere. And so I can't even take him seriously at all.
It doesn't make you like warm and fuzzy, because I think that's what he was going for, but he's Mr. Burns, so he doesn't know what that's like.
Yeah, I think he was hoping that we would want to cuddle up to him, but it's not going to happen. All of that to say, I mean, yes, his language has somewhat changed. I think as much out of necessity, though, because I mean, the stuff he was spouting off about before, the courts now are creating some uncertainty about. I think market manipulation and custody are two things that are relatively easy to understand and probably something that is pretty straightforward to enforce, because those rules actually are pretty clear. Actually, money transmission is another one that's pretty clear, and I think the rules will probably apply pretty closely from what exists. So anyways, I think he's shifting it. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more enforcement now around market manipulation and custody, of course, because that's what he says. So don't be surprised when it happens. But yeah, anyways, I mean, it feels weird to always be shitting on Gensler, but it's really the number one concern of the time right now, really, is we got to figure this regulation thing out, because there's so much uncertainty.
Especially with a lot of the news talks about crypto giants, and you and I talk about Binance almost every episode, because almost every episode Binance is ousting from somewhere and entering a different market. And if that's
leaving a big developed market and entering some tiny unknown, nobody can understand why market.
If that's any indication of what other crypto giants are going to do, which in some ways it has been. Others are entering the UAE, which has got a tiny market, but like others are leaving America and trying to enter other markets because there's just too much uncertainty. And that is not great for the American economy. It is really great for de-dollarization, though.
Yeah, it's really good if you're BRICS or if you're anybody else. So something that I've heard, we talked a little bit about this on one of the episodes, I think, when I had a guest, but something that is obviously, a big piece of conversation. Elon has a lot of opinions on this. We talked the other day about our AI czar, Kamala Harris, probably the least educated person in this area possible to be leading up the regulatory exploration. But anyways, so there's been a lot of criticism about this. And specifically when it comes to investments in crypto, I think the first one is, the deep fake thing, right? You can deep fake the shit out of KYC and AML and all of that. And that causes a ton of problems from a compliance perspective. As an asset issuer, if you've issued a token, you are ultimately responsible for every person that has your asset in their hands. And I don't know. I just think that like this opens up a lot of different risks. We're going to have to either come up with some regulation that watermarks some of this stuff in the compliance process or something, so that we can't deep fake it, because now the deep fakes are so good. It's too easy. Now, the other side of this, and I'll leave it and you can introduce the actual article, but the other side of this that I think is somewhat interesting is really just similar to what the HFT and quant craze did in the early 2000s and 2010s. Essentially, it just becomes like there's a few behemoths that have incredible resources and access to technologies, and they end up owning the market, and they end up squeaking out a lot of the profit that was available to your average kind of user and trader, because they're so fast and they're so sophisticated. I think we're going to see something pretty similar with AI, in the sense that building and training a better model will be the arms race for investments later. And no longer do you have a monopoly based on size, access, reach. Now it's tech. How much hardware do you have? Right. How many NVIDIA chips do you have? Like, that's it. Can you outcompete the next? And so I agree with Gary on this one. I actually think AI is not contributing net positive to the space at the moment. Could there be a lot of contribution? Yes. Hard hat Copilot, GitHub Copilot is amazing.
For sure.
There's a lot of AI applications for security. The flip side is also true. There's AI right now that is figuring out exploits in protocols. So it's just something that as a space we have to be very aware of. Finance in general, I think, is just, where AI could start to tip the scales. And I think Gary, in this case, albeit rarely, is right.
Intriguing. I guess the thing that, so the news, of course, is that Gary does not like AI. Gary says that it might even cause a financial crisis if investors and investment advisors use it incorrectly or unethically or what have you. And although I also don't necessarily agree, I just don't appreciate the tactic that he takes of fear-mongering first, which is kind of what we were just talking about, is now he's using softer language in crypto. If you can get people hyped and on board with you first, and then say, oh, and we need to do this regulation, and we need to pump the brakes on this portion, but not all of it, you're going to have a much happier jurisdiction. Like people are going to be way happier with you. They're going to buy into your rhetoric if you can start positive. And so I don't know why he's always coming out with negative first and then trying to backpedal. Maybe he should hire a different PR agency. I don't know.
Yeah. So I was talking initially more about like the high frequency trading and that the hedge funds and liquid funds and all this stuff. I think this is another one that if you're registered investment advisor in the United States, or if you're an advisor in Canada or any other jurisdiction, I think where this can really get sticky is what you're using for the advice that you're giving. So now, as an advisor, not only are you responsible for what you're telling them, you're also responsible for the accuracy of the tools that you're using. And I think right now, to Gary's point, it's abundantly clear that there's still some gaps and hallucinations that happen in these AI platforms, and they don't necessarily have foolproof access to the internet, although we believe they should. I just think, we got to be really careful. It's all the buzz right now. There's been tens of billions of dollars deployed to AI companies, multiple tens of billions of dollars. And so I would say approach this with a grain of salt. I think there's a lot of area for vulnerability, exploit, some really unfortunate learnings. And I think in this case, again, to me, I think Gary's right. So you won't hear me say that too often. But
so we've got all this FU Gary, but then we also have...
It's a consolation.
Okay, well, with our last couple of minutes, I want to talk about the RCMP. So that's America today. FU America. But the Canadian RCMP, so we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but there was new news. So we, as in Canadians, have engaged with Chainalysis for our Western Cyber Crimes and Crypto Crimes Investigations Unit, which is very exciting. It started with the Calgary Police, and now it can be scaled out, so, just like a tech startup. So the RCMP is now engaging in the same technology, and they're also using Chainalysis, but they realized that they didn't have anywhere to store seized assets. So now they're trying to figure out how to do that.
Which I think is kind of funny. It's like one of those things that like ignorance is bliss, right? Like you're like, oh yeah, we're going to do all this stuff. And then wait, shit. We don't understand it enough to figure out how we're going to safely and securely store this. I
like this idea because probably there was an intern who was like storing it ad hoc as need be. And then, that guy quit or something. And they were like, we don't have our own wallet.
Probably on a hot wallet or something. Not even a ledger or hardware wallet, let alone a multi-sig. But
I don't know why I think this is so funny, but I really do.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say we should apply for this, put a bid in for this tender. But honestly, the solution is actually not that complicated. They just need someone to help them walk through it.
Yeah, that's why we should tender it.
But this is very much the experience in emerging industries and so on. There's just certain things you don't know until you get there, and you're like, oh crap. We have a really good plan, but where are we going to store the assets like that? And so I think that's a sign of progress. If you have all the answers before you do anything, you're too late.
It is a sign of progress. I also appreciate that they are going to actively support 20 blockchains and that they have a plan in place for scaling up as more blockchains that are major come to fruition. But the other thing I wanted to talk about this is when I had Ben on and we talked about luxury NFTs and luxury watches. And then I believe you and I talked about that about a week later as well. One of the discussions was like, what do you do if somebody steals your whatever luxury NFT? Or what do you do if you've taken out a loan and then you default on that loan for the luxury NFT? Is there a metaverse loan shark? What does that look like? Well, now it's just the RCMP. They will seize your NFT and investigate it.
Well,
we answered our own question.
That, or we can in smart contracts build in collateralization and liquidation, right? So that's
kind of my point, though.
Okay,
they clearly don't know that much about how it works.
It's Friday, so
it's Friday.
Everybody go out, enjoy the weekend with your friends and family, and do what you love to do. Touch some grass, get some fresh air. It's summer in half the world, so enjoy that. We've got your back. We'll be tracking all the stuff that happens over the weekend. We've got the weekend news roundup on Monday. We're a live show Monday to Friday, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. We're all over the place. Make sure you help support us, like, share, subscribe. And with that today, Ceara, I say to you, go FUD yourself.
Go FUD yourself.
Later.